Hey guys, welcome back to Super Top 10s. Today we'll talk about the reasons why 2020 was the worst year. Let's head into it. Number 1. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Our ancestors might disagree that 2020 is the worst year on record. Sure, frightening things are happening, but many of those things happened in the past too, including the 1918 flu pandemic, during which 50 million people died. Plus, the belief that civilization is on the decline is a tradition as old as civilization itself. Even ancient Athenians complained in the 5th century BC that their democracy wasn't what it used to be. These days, we call that belief declinism, or decline bias. Before the pandemic, a majority of Americans already believed the country was going downhill. About 60% of respondents thought the nation's influence on the world was decreasing. According to a 2019 survey by the Pew Research Center, only 12% of people who responded to the poll were very optimistic about the country's future, while 31% were somewhat pessimistic, and 13% were very pessimistic about America's future. Now, Americans might feel worse about the future than they did before, especially because stay-at-home orders and isolation have been affecting our mental health, which in turn increases the likelihood that we'll see the world through the lens of negativity bias. In Western culture, people already have a propensity to interpret present events negatively and tend to prefer the past, according to the research of Carrie Moore Wedge, a professor of marketing at Boston University. That is because our autobiographical memories are biased towards positivity. When we think about the past, we tend to remember positive experiences. This is sometimes called rosy retrospection or nostalgia bias. If I'm thinking, for example, about how much I love going to baseball games, I'm not going to recall the times when my team lost. Moore Wedge says, we're judging the past on its greatest hits, but we judge the present on everything we have available. Number 2. Why doom scrolling and social media go hand in hand. Shocking almost no one, excessive news consumption causes stress. According to a 2017 survey by the American Psychological Association, respondents who kept up with the news cycle reported lost sleep, stress, anxiety, fatigue, and other negative mental health symptoms. The same survey found as many as 20% of Americans constantly monitor their social media feeds for updates, and 1 in 10 check the news every hour. Although it seems like the news today is more shocking than ever, the idea that media consumption negatively affects our perception of the world is nothing new. In 1968, an ambitious investigation kicked off at the Annenberg School of Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Called the Cultural Indicators Project, it became one of the first comprehensive studies of the influence of television on the attitudes and perceptions of American viewers. The study, led by the school's dean, George Gerbner, found a direct correlation between time spent watching television and the likelihood that the watcher will perceive the world as more frightening or dangerous, a phenomenon he called the mean world syndrome. Gerbner found that viewers who watch violent television shows typically believe violence is common in reality. This fell in line with his cultivation theory, which hypothesized that the more television people watch, the more they begin to believe that television mirrors reality instead of being stylized for dramatic effect. Modern research has continued to reinforce these ideas, but the effects aren't always negative. It all depends on the medium of consumption and how you use it. According to Mesfin Awokbikalu, a research scientist who studies the relationship between social media and public health at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Bikalu warns us not to conflate the effects of social media with previous research on television consumption. Unlike watching television, which is a passive activity, engaging on social media requires active participation, which means studying its effects is much more complicated. On the positive side, social media can offer its users emotional and social support, which some users have found indispensable during the pandemic. However, social media can also cause us to experience the displacement effect, a phenomenon in which mental activity takes the place of a physical human need. Number 3. Rosy introspection, or less antisocial networking. Psychologists say we may never see the present as perfect, but we can learn to control our biases. The first step is to acknowledge how the media we consume shifts our perceptions. It gives our panic-prone primate brains more reasons to feel stressed, and the more examples of the present to compare with our highly edited version of the past. When we are mindful of our thought patterns, we can take control of them and give ourselves a reality check, says Moore Wedge. To get control of your nostalgia bias, take a more realistic view of history and really compare it with the present. The pandemic is scary, but at least you're not a medieval peasant with a bubonic plague around every corner and with no understanding of how germs work. Put the present into perspective by taking stock in what we do have too. We are making progress socially and scientifically, and research teams around the world are working on vaccines for the coronavirus, a feat that wouldn't have been possible even 100 years ago. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our videos in the future. Also, watch the 2 videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video.